Okay, we're live. Okay, so what I want to do now is go back into explaining the significance of the shepherding, which we spoke about last time, but it was too short and it was too rich. The whole topic is too rich for the brief treatment or the quick treatment in last year. So I want to go into the whole business of the significance of the shepherding and how that connects with Bnei Yisrael selecting וגשם. So, what are we going to explain? What's the significance here that they're shepherds, and how does that tie into the fact that they are separate from Mitzrayim? And what does that connect? How does that connect with the bringing Yaakov and the brothers to Mitzrayim, which we explained is introducing to Mitzrayim the Bnei Yisrael way and their way of dealing with parnasa / food and the hunger. Okay, those were the points that we discussed all last time. Oh, thank you. But now I want to really get into it, and I want to get into the parshas that we keep on going back to and show you a lot of the references, so we see the richness of these ideas. Okay, so those are the themes we have over here. Yosef is here in Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim dealt with the hunger through Yosef's ingenuity, and specifically by utilizing their wealth to protect them from the hunger. That's the mahalach in Mitzrayim. The mahalach in Eretz Yisrael is that they're dependent on rain, dependent on Hashem. And Yosef joins the Mitzri side and supports them, works with them. Yaakov and Yosef's brothers stand for this alternative system. They come to Mitzrayim, but they don't join Yosef. They stay in Ghoshen, which is closer to Eretz Canaan, maybe even a part of Eretz Canaan. And this whole distinction between them and Mitzrayim comes to a head revolving around the fact that they're shepherds. Okay, so let's mention some sukkim that suggest that we have to look at a unifying theme over here. The pasuk says that Yosef sat alone, the brothers sat alone, and the mitzim sat alone, because the mitzim cannot eat lechem with the ivrim, ki to'eva hi leMitzrayim. Okay, so we have this concept of to'eva regarding eating together with the ivrim. Yosef is put in charge of everything in his master's house, ki im halechem. So there seems to be this difference between Mitzrayim and everyone else revolving around lechem. Here we have, in our pasuk we're looking at now, the end of Perek Me'avav, Toyavas Mitzrayim kol ra'yet. Aha. This comes back to eating, because we have later in Sefer Shmos, Hey nizbach es Toyavas Mitzrayim. If we're going to slaughter Toyavas Mitzrayim, they're going to kill us. And ultimately, when we left Mitzrayim, we slaughter sheep and eat it. And the essence of the Korban Pesach is for the eating, as Chazal say. It's not really a korban, it's really la'achila. So the theme I'm just bringing out is that the difference between us and Mitzrayim revolves around food. There's a difference that one of the focal points of the difference is lechem, because Yosef doesn't eat lechem with them. The Mitzrayim don't eat lechem with the Ivrim. Another one revolves around sheep, and it seems like that also has to do with eating sheep, because when we leave Mitzrayim, we eat the sheep. And here we have this point of being ra'yet. Okay? Fine. So let me explain to you the theory of it, of the sheep eating, the significance of us eating sheep when we leave Mitzrayim, and then we'll look at all the psukim inside, because I want to make sure we get everything clear. The theory goes like this. It's not so simple to eat meat. That's the pasuk in Pashas Achemos. If you don't put the blood on the mizbeach, it's akin to murder. And what does it mean it's akin to murder? Killing a sheep is like killing a human. This is very similar to the notion that the Egyptians deified the sheep. Either that they worship the Mazel Tleh, okay, that Chazal say, Ibn Ezra and others say that they didn't like Ra'yet because they didn't eat sheep. They worshiped them. Some people say, no, it's not true. But there is that idea. And I don't know about whether that works in Pshat in the Pasuk. I don't know if that works historically. But there is that idea that the Mitzrayim deify sheep. So the notion that killing a sheep is like killing a human and the deification of sheep is one and the same thing. Why? Because, of course, man is Tzelem Elokim. We know that there's something special, there's something important in the world. And what is that important thing? So we say, oh, it's a person. A person's important. A person is godly. So what's godly about a person? Well, it depends what a person is. If a person is identified by his body, and at the same time we say, well, people are important, there's something in this world that represents divinity or God's plan, and if those are people, and people are their guf, then animals are also in that league. If a person is something transcendent of his body, then an animal, and that's what makes him special, then an animal is not on the same level. Okay, so what? So it goes like this. So what was Mitzrayim's big thing? Mitzrayim was self-reliance. They don't need Hashem. They have the Nile River. So what are they relying on? What the pasuk calls mortal might, mortal power. So then mortal power, so animals also have this kind of share in this power, which is significant. If mortal power is what makes human beings special, then the animals also have what's it called? The nitzitz nishmas alika, right? Chelik kami mal mamish, whatever. Mashek in Israel, their mahalach is a mahalach of achanor and nova, and relying on Hashem. The derech of panas and Eretz Yisrael is to be relying on rain, which is to say not to be self-sufficient. So if you're not self-sufficient, you're not proud of mortal power. Instead, you recognize your dependence on Hashem. So as the pasuk says, again, like I said, we're going to look at these pasukim because we want to put it all together. Instead of gruas and sheke ish, you realize that what's important about humans is that they fear Hashem. So then that makes you more than an animal. Because animals don't fear Hashem. Okay, now let me show you this in some psukim. The fact that the difference in Yisrael and Mitzrayim revolves around Achilah, that we have in the mitzvahs of Yetzias Mitzrayim, which revolve around eating, of course, matzah and Pesach, right? The lechem and the basar. So there's a difference in the lechem. There's a unique kind of lechem, there's a unique kind of basar. And this we see in Perek Yud Beis in Pashas Bai. It's a number of games the Torah does. The Torah does a lot. The root ochal, the root aleph chof lamed appears 7 times in the Hilchas Pesach, which is the Perek Yud Beis pasuk aleph through pasuk Yud Daled. The root aleph chof lamed occurs 7 times, and then the next 5 psukim, 6 psukim, which are the laws of matzah, it also you have the root ochal 7 times. And you have them another 7 times in Perek Yud Beis, pasuk Mem Gimel. Zois Chukas HaPesach. In that parsha, you also have Ochal 7 times. Okay, so the Torah is alluding to us that, in case we didn't realize that it's all about Ochal, boom, that's what we care about. Okay, why is it all about eating? So what's the difference in Mitzrayim and Eretz Yisrael? The pasuk says, Lo yikeretz Eretz Yisrael is not Eretz Mitzrayim. In Mitzrayim, there's a river, and they always have panos. And Eretz Yisrael, you depend on the rain. Okay. For what? For grain. For grain. So the grain of Eretz Yisrael is different than the grain of Mitzrayim, and that means you have to eat lechem oini. Why does that have to do with lechem oini? That I spoke about my sefer. We don't have to go into it now. Now we're talking about the bread, the meat part. But there's 2 types of bread. There's a bread that you get from gaiva and self-reliance, and there's a bread that comes from reliance on Hashem, and that bread is lechem oini. Fine. That's the bread of Eretz Yisrael. What about the basar? So that we spoke about. The mitzvim don't eat meat. Again, according to some, or they have a problem with eating meat, or they have some sort of wrong conception of meat, because because of the same reason. Because they're self-sufficient and they don't need Hashem, therefore they think that they're not Yirei Hashem. So they are people that appreciate Guasa Sud Shrika Ish. And then they can't eat meat. But we, who know that, no, we have to be Yirei Hashem, so that makes us more than a piece of meat. Maybe that's why we can eat meat. Okay, that's the basic idea.
We add in tefillin, which is not the Teres Hashem Beficha.
How so? About eating, you mean beficha? And I'm mutter beficha.
Saying it's from an animal.
Right, and it has to be kosher. Beficha.
The Teres Hashem Beficha, as opposed to Mitzrayim, who wouldn't consider this as Teres Hashem Beficha.
Why do you mean they wouldn't consider it?
Because it's calling an animal.
So they wouldn't consider that.
They wouldn't consider that a godly thing to do, admirable thing.
Right. Right. I thought you were saying about beficha also. Beficha. Yeah, they're saying beficha. Interesting, right? Very good. Okay, so now let me show you the psukim where I get this from. So let's start in Yeshaya Perek Lamed. Okay, so this is the idea, and I want to give you all the sources, and we'll see some more chedushim in our parsha. Okay, so Yeshaya Perek, let's start with Perek Lamed Aleph. Yeshaya Perek Lamed Aleph. Hoy hayordim Mitzrayim le'Ezra asusim yisha'enu. They go down to Mitzrayim for help, and they rely on horses instead of Kedosh Yisrael. So this is talking about when there was a threat from Ashur, and the people thought that, okay, we'll make a pact with Mitzrayim, and that's the way we'll be saved from Ashur, because they have power. And the Navi does not think this is a good idea, because Mitzrayim Adam Beloy El. Mitzrayim is human and not God. And the horses are mere flesh and not spirit. Okay. Which is the same as saying, because what does it mean, that means there's a havamina that Hashem is chafetz b'guas hasos. What does that mean? That means like the same thing the Navi is saying. That maybe a sus is ruach. What does it mean a sus is ruach? It means maybe a sus actually stands for Hashem. Maybe where's Hashem in the world? Is Hashem in the world in the fact that when it's batad Hashem, achniyat Hashem, or is Hashem in the world in the fact that there's things here, and that's what's real. That's what's the most real, most absolute. That's the question. So we'll have a mina that begruas means no, there's nothing more absolute than something tangible, and the stronger it is, the more absolute it is. The stronger it is in a tangible way, the more absolute it is, which means the more permanent, the more godly, which would mean that they're an el and a ruach. Says the Navi, no, Mitzrayim is not el. It's Adam, and the horse is Basar, not Ruach. Okay? So here we see that idea that how we think of ourselves and how we think of animals goes together. And then we see that further, even more so, in Pasuk Daled. Pasuk Daled says that like a lion protects its own teref when a lion takes a sheep, and he's holding the sheep in his mouth, and all the shepherds come and try to get the sheep away, but the lion is not afraid of them. So too Hashem is going to hover over and protect Har Tzion. So this is talking about Chizkiyahu against Ashur, and Hashem is going to protect, right, like the Navi says, in Pasuk Ches, v'nafal Ashur b'cherv lo ish. There's going to be miraculous decimation of Ashur in a godly way. This, of course, is reminding us of Mitzrayim. And if, in the case of Nachul, look at Pasuk Hey, Pasayach v'himlet, gonoin v'hitzel, Pasayach v'himlet. So the Navi is drawing a parallel to Pesach. Just like over there, there's this miraculous salvation. Hashem himself comes down and hovers over the houses and protects and jumps over, and he kills the enemy and spears the Bnei Yisrael. So too, Hashem is going to come to Har Tzion, the site of where Sancheriv has amassed his armies, and he's going to protect Bnei Yisrael while he miraculously destroys Sancheriv's armies. And why is he protecting Bnei Yisrael? Oh, well, here's the mashal. Like a lion protects the sheep that he wants to eat from the shepherd, so too Hashem wants to eat us. That's the mashal, follow the mashal. And he wants to eat us, and therefore he's going to protect us from the enemies who want to kill us, because he wants to eat us. What does that mean? So what does that mean? Why is it not using that mashal? Because the Navi is saying like this. Mitzrayim is basar v'loy adam v'loy el, basar v'loy ruach. Okay, what makes us better? Because we're willing to die for Hashem. If we're willing to die for Hashem, that tells us that we don't think that our basar is, or our physical thing is godly. Because we're willing to give that up. We're willing to give up the body. So that's the same thing as what Hashem is Yireh. Fearing Hashem is recognizing that the body can be sacrificed to Hashem. And the body is not what gives you power, and the body is a contingent kind of temporary power. And that, paradoxically, is what makes us better than the animals, right? Meaning the way it goes like this. Everyone holds humans are special. The question is, are humans special because the body is special? Then animals are special too. But if humans are special because they're the only ones who recognize that the body is not special, because they're the only ones who are Yirei Hashem and the only ones who sacrifice themselves, then that makes them more than a body, and that makes them be allowed to eat the sheep, like happened in Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim. So the point of the Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim is, why does Hashem protect us? Because why does Hashem protect Bnei Yisrael? Because they sacrifice their bodies to Him. And that's obviously what a carbon is. Carbon is a symbol of sacrificing our body. And that fact that we're willing to do that is what makes us be able to eat the animal, as opposed to the Mitzrim who say, don't eat the animal. It's like murder. Why is it like murder? Because and Susayim is Ruach. It's not just Basar. No such thing as just Basar. Everything is Ruach. Because once the human is Ruach, this is Ruach too. We say no. There's no Ruach. We're just a piece of flesh, and therefore Hashem could kill us. But that very fact that we're recognizing that Hashem could kill us, that's what makes us better than the animals. Because animals don't do that, right? Like I think maybe once told this to you. That a moiser hadam and abeim ahoyin kiakol hava, right? But you know what? There is still a moiser. I'll tell you what the moiser is. Because only a human says moiser hadam and abeim ahoyin. No behem ever walked around and said, I'm not better than any other behem. No, but that was saying it's a real word. That okay, so fine. You're saying that you haven't found anything about you that makes you special. But you thought about that. And that reflection becomes the most important thing about you. And that reflection is unique to humans, which is the same thing as Yiras Hashem, I think. It's just, in a very broad sense. It's that everything I think is important actually maybe is not important, and Hashem does what He wants. But you're the one thinking that. So you're different than the animal. And therefore Hashem protects you from the enemies, because He wants to eat you, meaning, yes, this recognition of Yirei is actually very important to Hashem. So that's what Navi is trying to do, and by his reference to Pesach, Pasayach v'Himlet, he's telling us how to understand the significance of eating the sheep and putting the blood on the mezuzah. He's saying, since we die for Hashem, we're like His sheep. So if a person who recognizes that he's like Hashem's sheep, he's the one who could eat a sheep, because that makes him more than a sheep. And a person who doesn't recognize that he's a sheep of Hashem, meaning he thinks, no, Hashem shouldn't kill me, because what do you mean? I have a body, it's very important. Well, then for that same reason, the sheep also has a body, and the horse has a body, and then he doesn't belong killing anyone. Okay, that's the key part I see from here. Fine, so here's one place, so far what do you have? That here in our parsha is one place where we have shepherds being very important, sheep being very important, and that seems to fit into this question about the way we eat as opposed to the way Mitzrayim eats. And this revolves around whether we are ultimately dependent on Hashem or we are self-reliant. That's what has been established so far. Now, let's go to Mizmor Kuf Mem Zayin and Lamed Gimel. This is something we keep on going back to, but I want to do now is chazer some of the references so that we'll be able to understand better the significance of shepherding and animals here. So let's take a look at Kuf Mem Zayin. We always say that Kuf Mem Zayin is a reference to this story. So I want to just go through the psukim. What we're going to do is we're going to look at Kuf Mem Zayin and Lamed Gimel. So I'll do one at a time, but some points will become clearer when you compare the two. After we look at Kuf Mem Zayin, we'll go to Lamed Gimel, and we'll go through that, and I'll show you also how it corresponds. So, Kitav Zamra Lekenu Noim Nava Sehila, fine. It doesn't seem to be really significant, but we'll see when we compare it to Lamed Gimel that it is. The first pasuk of Kuf Mem Zayin. So there's a theme about Yerushalayim and gathering of Nitchei Yisrael. And that theme is put into contrast with the enemies, because it says later, some Givulech Shalom. So your boundary is Shalom, like only your area, and Magid Dvar V'Liyaakov Le'asachin L'chol Goy. So there's a difference between us and them, and we have to be in Yerushalayim, and we have to be gathered together. In our story, remember we have Goshen is like Tzion in Yerushalayim, as Yeshaya calls it. Am B'Tzion in Yerushalayim. Goshen is Kaddish, and Goshen is where the Nidches all get back together, and that's contrasted to Yaakov. Fine, to Paroi. We'll see soon. Right for the Shur we spoke about this with the names of Bnei Yisrael and Godlani and Rav Kosner in Mispar. Okay, we don't have to go all the references. Then the Navi talks about rain. Pasuk Ches. Hashem makes it rain. Now this is very significant because rain is the difference between Yerushalayim and the Chol Goy, and especially Yerushalayim and Mitzrayim. And say, look, Hashem makes it rain, and Hashem gives food to the animals, to the ravens. So what's the pasuk saying with the animals over here? So it's saying, look, Hashem takes care of the animals, the helpless animals. So therefore, you think, there's a hunger, we better go do something about it. But what do you mean? Who feeds the ravens? Who feeds the animals out in the field that are helpless? Hashem does. Why? Because He makes it rain, and matzmiach chatzir, and everything's great. So matzmiach harim chatzir, Hashem makes it things grow. We'll take care of you also. You don't need the horse and the shoykei ish. Of course, we spoke about Yosef and Paroi. Rather, Yireyav, Machmachasta, it's Yaakov. And that's Bnei Yisrael when they're united in Goshen, which is like Yerushalayim and Tzion. The sons of Yaakov were all together, the sons of Yisrael. Yosef tried to give Shalom to Paroi. He said, but really Shalom is supposed to go to Gvulech. Parenthetically, Mizmor Pei Aleph, we said this morning, is also there. It's Mekufurish. Edus B'Yosef Somoi, Tzei Selet Time. And there the pasuk, there's a shver pasuk. It goes the last pasuk over there. Vayachileu michelev chita. Mesani Hashem yichachu shuloi v'hitam lo'elam. Vayachileu michelev chita u'mitzur dvash l'pegi. He fed him from chelev chita, and from the tzur I will give you dvash. So it starts with third person. He fed him, and then it switches. So I think Vayachileu michelev chita is talking about the Mesani Hashem. Mesani Hashem yichachu shuloi is Paroi, because he said lo yadati es Hashem. And Vayachileu, and he, Yosef, fed Paroi mechelev chita. And it's not supposed to be that way, because really, I could feed you, Hashem says. You want to eat a lot of food? I'll take you out of Mitzrayim and listen to me and ask for what you want, and I'll give you everything. But instead, Yosef gives the chelev chita to the Mesani Hashem. It's not supposed to be that way. We're going to get dvash from the tzur, so therefore you see that Hashem doesn't need the wealth of Mitzrayim. Okay, so that's another reference over here of the chelev chita. Okay, and now we go back to rain, but here it switches to the word of Hashem. So it's going to switch back and forth between the word of Hashem and meteorology. He already established that Hashem sends the rain, and now it says Hashem sends His word to the earth, which comes quickly, and He makes snow come. So what it's doing is like this: a big theme in the Nevi'im, that the fact that the rain and snow comes from the heavens, which is Hashem's place, is a mashal for the fact that Hashem's word comes from Shemayim too. And the same way that comes quickly, Hashem's word comes quickly. Again, we have Devaroi, Hashem's word, as the Ruach, and again, Devarov, the Yaakov Kushvatol as Chilach Hagoy. Okay. This business of it coming quickly, it says at the beginning of Miketz that Yosef said, the reason why the dream was repeated twice is Ki Mamar Halakim La'asoi. And Yosef said to his brothers, Maharu va'alu alavi, and tell him, Koyamar bincha Yosef, there's going to be another 5 years of hunger, you better get moving. And the Maisa, there was not another 5 years of hunger. It ended when Yaakov came, indicating that Yosef's need to be memaher was misplaced, because you know what's memaher? The word of Hashem that comes from the Shemayim, like the Navi says. It's Devaroi. You think that the word of Hashem, which is coming through a dream, that's where the hurrying comes from? No, really, the word of Hashem of Nevuah is the word that's memaher. Don't be so sure of what happens through dreams. Don't be so confident and say we better move fast. Everything's happening. No, it's not happening. The only thing that happens is the davar that goes to Yaakov, Yisrael, not the davar that's captured in Egypt and influenced by the Mahalach of Mitzrayim. Okay, that's maybe 50% of the references in that kapitel. I want to go back because I wanted to bring it all together, and I wanted you to notice this new idea, which we never spoke about before, which is that Hashem takes care of the animals, the helpless animals, so Hashem will take care of you also. That's I think, part of the shepherding. We spoke about it last week. The fact that they're shepherds, and they're anshe mikneh, and they're weak, and they're passive and helpless, like animals are, because that's the Navi's mashal. We depend on Hashem, and we recognize that He might rip us up, and like a lion rips up a sheep, and that's what makes us special. So it's identifying with the sheep, which is what makes us different than the mitzvah. In other words, again, paradoxically, we eat sheep because we identify with sheep. Because we look at ourselves and say, we're just a sheep and Hashem could destroy us and we will depend on Hashem. Then we say, we did that, and Hashem likes that we're doing that. He's roitze b'zeh, so therefore it makes us a cut above the sheep, and that's why we eat sheep. The Mitzrayim, that's a te'eva to Mitzrayim, because Mitzrayim says, no. We also agree humans are special, but humans are not special because they recognize that they're nothing. They're special because they're special. And if they're special because they're special, meaning the body is special. If the body is special, then the sheep is also special. That's what the Mechik is about.
We're both starting out that the humans and the sheep are in the same boat.
Exactly. The question is which way you go with that.
Yisrael ends up saying humans are cut above the sheep.
Right, exactly. Yisrael says, we're like a sheep, just like you kill a sheep, you can kill me. And then okay, walk around. And all of a sudden Hashem's very happy that people are saying you can kill him, because that's what He wants for some reason. He wants dependency, Ra'av, and so on and so forth. Whatever, that changes everything. So then that becomes a cut above. The Mitzrim say, we're the same as a sheep, but the Maisa was special. So it must be that the body is special.
I feel like what you're saying, you see very clearly in Pashas Vayikra. Yaakov becomes the Balabas over the sheep in terms of he's determining which ones are going to be born. He's taking control in a certain sense of the sheep.
Right.
Meaning, so he's totally establishing who's in control.
Yeah, so right. Okay, look, the thing of controlling sheep is voracious, right? What's man supposed to do? Like, that's what it means to be a man.
That means to genetically engineer them?
No, I'm saying no, it's very good what you're saying. But the Iker concept that, what does it mean to be an Adam b'talmeinu? Right? That's what makes a man a cut above. And that's in Tehillim. The fact that you control the sheep. So you're saying that Yaakov, I think what you're saying was that you're saying on Yaakov's case, the fact that he's so manipulating them, that's like establishing the absolute dominion.
Right.
Yeah, very good. Very nice. Right, so this Ra'ayin and Achim Aviseinu, Lamaisa, what it's about ultimately is saying that humans, that we're not animals.
Right.
We're not animals.
And I wonder if the word mikna relating to Kinyan, as in they have ownership of it. Is there a relation to mikna and Kinyan?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think so. I think mikna is kin. Yeah.
So it's not that they're Ra'ayin sign that they meaning the Ra'ayin sign with this attitude of control.
Yeah, I mean,
what you're saying is interesting because typically, I'm sure there's a chazal that says this, right? That why were the Avos and David and they're all Ra'ayin sign because to make sure to be a leader, you have to be able to care for. It's establishing a leadership quality, right? But you're taking an entirely different approach. You're saying it's nothing to do with maybe perhaps the reason why Yisrael is the right time has nothing to do with the leadership quality. It's
right.
Almost like a theological.
Right. It's it's leadership over yourself. It's mastery over your own body. Yeah. Right. It's mastery over your own body. Yeah. Yeah. Right, and I think also the Torah Mitzrayim K'roitzen makes sense now because, in a very simple way, who's more likely to deify a sheep, a shepherd, or a non-shepherd? Non-shepherd, exactly. So, because the shepherd he chaps it, he sees they're just sheep. So the shepherd is likely to go the other way. He's like, they're just sheep, and he starts chapping. I'm also just a sheep. That's exactly what happens. Shepherd turns to Hashem. He's like, look, these sheep, they're so nebuch. I just chop. I'm the same nebuch. I'm just a little smarter than them. But that's the point. Because you had that reflection that you're a nebuch. They never had that reflection. No sheep ever said, Hashem, take me. Sheep doesn't bring itself as a carbon. The human could bring himself as a carbon. And the male, once the human could bring himself as a carbon, boom. Now he's better than the sheep. Now the sheep should take his place. Right? It says in the Kedah. Yeah. Right, exactly. So I think I think even the Tervis Mitzrayim Ra'iyat Sign makes sense. It's like the Ra'iyat Sign undermine their whole mahalach. Because they think humans are special. Okay, so then they have to have, the sheep also have to be special. So you can't have the Ra'iyat Sign like, the sheep. This is just stuff. You don't want these guys around you, these Ra'iyat Sign, reminding us that sheep are just like cheftzes, basically. That's the problem. We really have to keep them away. Like, it makes sense. They're Ra'iyat Sign.
It's an interesting muscle for other...
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly right. Okay. Shai, the mice like this. Okay, right. Now that's Kufam Zayin. So that's the new theme I want to bring out. So again, I want to chaz the whole thing and show you how it comes together. And also I wanted to bring out this point that Kufam Zayin is making a point that, look, Hashem cares for the animals. Because that's another thing a shepherd learns. So I'm saying it's another thing that comes from being a shepherd. You realize that the sheep are dependent on Hashem, and yet, like the Gemara in End of Kedushin, right? You ever saw a fox who's a shopkeeper? Hashem takes care of the animals. Hashem can take care of you also. So the fact that you hang around animals inspires you to say, nice and crow, and then makes you realize that maybe I could also be an animal. It depends on Hashem. Like animals depend on me. And how do I do that? Oh, maybe by cultivating dependence. That's right. Hashem is Yisrael. So that's the major dichotomy between Yisrael and Mitzrayim. Okay, now let's go to Mizrach Lamed Gimel. And there, see, this is very interesting to note. Ranu tzadikim Hashem laHashem nava sehila. Remember, kitav zamar ledekenu ki noim nava sehila. So that tells me, these two Mizmarim are talking to each other. Heard Hashem bechina v'never l'zamar l'ay. I think they would have that too, right? En Hashem b'say d'zamar l'hina bechina in Kufam Zayin. Okay. Tivunagim b'srua. No, I thought there was something about that also. Okay, right. So now we're learning Lamed Gimel. Lamed Gimel has a theme about the Dvar Hashem. Yasher Dvar Hashem. And later it says, B'Dvar Hashem Shemayim Nasu. Okay. Remember we had the Magid Dvar of Liakov in the other Mizmor. Who has the Davar? And Ashleichem Rasei Arts on Meher Yoretz Dvarei. The Davar is a major theme in the Yosef Parashiyos. It starts with Alech Nore Eishlem Achecha V'Shlem Atzim V'Ashiveni Davar, and Aviv Shamar is a Davar. And that Davar is the Dvar Hashem. The Dvar Hashem which goes into hiding, and Yosef lives without it. It lives without Nevuah. And everyone's looking for the Davar, for Das Hashem, for clarity of Hashem, for Dvar Hashem. Why is everyone looking for Dvar Hashem? Because Dvar Hashem Shemayim Nasu, you know Dvar Hashem, you know everything. Because look what it says later in this Mizmor. Since Dvar Hashem creates everything, therefore, Hu Omar Vayehu Tziva Vayamid, everything comes if you know the Dvar Hashem. Therefore, the Atzas Goyim and the Machshavos Amim are not, which are not rooted in Dvar Hashem, they are not forever. Only the Atzas Hashem is forever, and therefore, if Hashem is your God, good for you. Okay. And then we have the theme again of the king is not saved by Choyel and Rav Koyach, the Shus doesn't help, fine. Rather, Yireov, those are the ones that are saved from Rav. Why? Because since the Dvar Hashem creates everything, so we have a new mahalach here. Tap into Dvar Hashem, and that will save you from any trouble. Any trouble you have, you just want Dvar Hashem. That's the sense. That's the general sense of the Mizmor. So, and that brings us back to Kufam Zayin. Magid Dvar Yaakov. The question is, if you have the Davar, if you understand the Dvar Hashem, then you have a different way to be saved from the Rav, because you're tapped into that which is at the root of everything. But there's a difference between, like in Kufam Zayin, there's a difference between Yaakov and Kol Goy, and in Lamed Gimel, the same thing. There's a difference between the Goy Asher Hashem Aleikav and the other ones, because only the Goy Asher Hashem Aleikav is tapped into the Dvar Hashem, so therefore they have the Atzas Hashem, which is forever. Okay, and that's I want to just go back to that, and they're also just maybe this Pshan Chazal. The pasuk Hayotzi Yachad Liban Amevel Kol Masayim, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah brings that and says, that tells us that Hashem looks at everyone at one time, and the whole world goes in front of Hashem like Bnei Morin. What's Bnei Morin? Sheep. Going to Amshan the Gemara. Maybe that's where we get sheep into this Mizmah, because if you compare it to Kufam Zayin, and the whole point of it is that we are like the animals, just like the animals in the field are dependent on Hashem, we should also be like sheep and receive from Hashem. So to this Mizmah, which is dealing with the same theme, we could read into this Mizmor that everyone in front of Hashem is like a sheep. Okay. So now, we spoke about the fact that he brought his father, and his father is weak. He props him up in front of Parai, and similarly he takes his weak brothers. Okay. So what's the point over here? That Mitzrayim is all about might, and Yosef gets on board with that. And Yisrael stands for, you know what? Maybe we're like sheep. Maybe we're weak. Maybe we're like the sheep in the mashal of Yeshaya that's in Hashem's mouth. So that's the lesson over here. Remember, Yeshaya said it over there in Perek Lamed Aleph. He said in the context of don't go down to Mitzrayim. Hoy hayor de Mitzrayim le'Ezra. So to Yosef, who goes down to Mitzrayim or whatever, he's forced into it, but he stands for the descent to Mitzrayim, and they're like, no, we're not going to go down to Mitzrayim because we don't respect the horse. Instead, we want to be like the sheep that's passive and helpless, and that's our relationship to Hashem. Okay, and that's, of course, as I said, that revolves around rain, because that's all dependent on Hashem. And these themes, rain, dependence on Hashem, hunger, and animals and their helplessness are in Yeshaya Perek Lamed. There's also, I mentioned, all these things were mentioned last week, but it was so quickly, and I feel like we have to really just let it settle and bring out all the points. And this aspect is also a chiddush, that the recognition that animals are dependent on Hashem is supposed to inspire us to be the same thing. So Perek Lamed says like this. We'll start from Pasuk Tes Vav. Hashem offers you shuva v'nachas, but instead you want to go on a horse. Okay, familiar themes. You could live in Tzion, Pasuk Tes, live in Tzion, Yerushalayim, and then Hashem will take care of you. He'll give you lechem tzar u'mayim lachas. Lechem tzar u'mayim lachas means, okay, there's a hunger. Okay, but you know what? Doesn't mean you have to run to Mitzrayim. You could stay in Tzion, stay in Yerushalayim, and Hashem will give you a small amount of bread. That's fine also. Fine. Okay, you'll know where to go. Instead of running down to Mitzrayim without knowing where to go, just running on your own, without having Hashem direct you. Pasuk Chav Gimel, Hashem is going to give you rain. And your mikneh is going to pasture, Karn Yerchav, it's going to be very nice for them. And the sheep, what does it mean again? I forgot. Cows, rams, I forgot. And the donkeys, they're going to eat hay mixed with water, zeh gishmak. So it's describing the chotzir, the animal food that that your animals are going to eat, and it's putting the context of rain because what we're offering Bnei Yisrael, what the Navi is saying is Hashem is offering you. You could be as calm as the animals are. Shuva v'nachas, those are things that sheep do, right? It's like a sheep, shuva v'nachas. No, but you want horses. You want power. No, you don't have to. You could be like the animal out in the field when it rains. It's geshmak for him, and he's very happy. You could be the same thing. You're not going to have so much bread, not going to be so wealthy. It's also fine. It doesn't matter so much. You could be like an animal. So that's just supporting this reading in our parasha that the Ra'yet is inspiring us to live as animals do in a state of dependence and a state of basically mistapek mamut. Whatever Hashem gives us, we're happy with. It gives us less, we're good. It gives us more is also good. Okay. Now, what else? Let's talk about the Amida. So we spoke about Yosef stands in front of Pari, Oymin Lifnei Pari, and Yaakov doesn't stand in front of Pari. Instead, it says Ve'amideu Lifnei Pari. And this Amida is also present in Kuf Mem Zayin and Lamed Gimel. Kuf Mem Zayin, it says, when it talks about meteorology, it says, Hashem's word comes from Shemayim, and Hashem's snow comes from Shemayim. Lifnei Karasei mi Ya'amod. You cannot stand in front of Hashem's cold. Aha. And in Mizmor Lamed Gimel, it says, Atzas Hashem la'olam tamid. You know what's forever? That's Hashem. So let's first talk about Kuf Mem Zayin. Kuf Mem Zayin is saying this. You think you have Sheikh Yesh, you think Sheikh Yesh is so hot, such an amazing thing? Try to stand, because we said, Yosef stands in front of Parai, Daniel stands by Heichal HaMelech. Try to stand out in the cold, and you'll see how long you can last. So it means when you're facing Hashem's might, which is characterized or symbolized maybe by the weather, then as strong as you are, you won't be able to stand. Fine. And what's Yosef doing in Mitzrayim, Be'etzim? Mitzrayim is not subject to the vicissitudes of the weather. That's the whole thing of Mitzrayim, is that they don't need the rain. It doesn't snow, doesn't rain. And they don't have this whole problem of the capriciousness of the weather and the fact that you never know how it's going to act. So Yosef stands for this mahalech of, we're safe, we stand on our own 2 feet, right? As the metaphor goes, or as the figure goes. And really, the Navi is saying, okay, very nice, but there's another mahalech. When you actually have to face Hashem through the weather, you recognize that you're nothing in front of Hashem. And so instead, what is Oimid? What is Oimid? Says the Lamed Gimel, Atzas Hashem la'olam tamid, because that thing which is not the Atzas Hashem, because it's not rooted in the Devar Hashem, but rather it's Shlem Para, it's Yosef's Mahalach, so that's Sheker, and that's Hashem Heini, that's not forever. Yosef thinks he could stand, says the Navi, no, that's not what stands. Atzas Hashem la'olam tamid. Now, I want to end with this. I want to talk about this, the Fnei Korasim Miyamoid. Let's look in Yirmiyah Perek Lamed Gimel. Yirmiyah Perek Lamed Chav Gimel, which is all about Yosef, who's a dreamer, and really you should be Nevi'im and not dreamers. So let's start with Pasuk Tazayin. This is a message to the prophets, but these are false prophets, don't really speak in the name of Hashem. And later in this parak, I'm later in Perek of Gimel Pasuk Tazayin. Later in the parak, these are the dreamers as opposed to the Nevi'im. They say lemenaatzai. They say to those of Menaatz Hashem, Diber Hashem Shalom Yelachem. This is a reference to Yosef, who told Pari, the Menaatz Hashem. Also, remember I said he's also called Mensani Hashem Yichach Shulai. And remember in Pe'alav it says, what's the problem with Yosef? Vayechu b'shuyos libam. So Pari is Mensani Hashem Yichach Shulai. He's Halach b'shuyos libai. And instead, in Yosef, nonetheless commits to him and says everything's going to be fine. And mi amad b'sayid Hashem. If you really want to speak to power, you have to stand in Hashem's counsel, and only if you stood in Hashem's counsel. And not everyone could do that. Not everyone could predict the future. Mi amad b'sayid Hashem b'yev yishma as dvaray. Mi yikshav dvaray v'yishma. You think you speak for God. Yosef thinks he speaks for God. He says, Koyam ben Yosef, and he says, and this Isha Shuach Elikim, but not everyone could really be Oimid beside Hashem. Hine Saras Hashem. Hashem's anger is like a storm, and storms are not so pashut to stand. The im omdu beside if you later. If you're taka navi, then you should bring him back to Hashem. Fine, okay. So not everyone's able to be omdu beside Hashem. You have to be a navi, and Hashem's like a storm. Now look, the same idea in Perek Lamed in Yirmiyah. We have Kamat, very similar psukim. This is in Perek Lamed Pasuk Chof Aleph. There it says, Hashem will bring a person close to him, v'nigash elai, ki mihu zeh orav es liba legeshes elai nom Hashem. Who is able to have the courage to approach Hashem? Because, 2 psukim there, hine sayas Hashem chem bayotzas, mamash the same psukim as before, if you look back. So, who is able to be oimid beside Hashem, and who is able to approach Hashem? Because Hashem is like a storm. This is a reference to Yosef and Yehuda. Yosef thinks he could stand and speak for Hashem. Really, not everyone could stand. Because Hashem is like a storm, l'fnei karasim yamin. And remember, the storm in Kuf Mem Zayin is a mashal for the word of Hashem that comes to the heavens. So just like you can't stand in front of the cold, you can't stand when the word of Hashem comes. You have to be a navi. Not everyone could withstand that. And Yosef thinks he could stand. Actually, he can't stand, meaning he's not a navi. That's one person that the navi Yirmiyah is referring to. Another one is Yehuda, who's Vayigash Elav Yehuda. So here the Navi is making an allusion to that. We're not going to go into the point, to the Vart, but he's making an allusion to Yehuda, who's Nigash to Hashem, and he's saying, Hashem is going to bring him close, because a person can't have the courage to bring him close, because Hashem is like a storm. So there's 2 things that had to happen in the whole story, right? Yosef had to reach his perfection, and Yehuda had to reach his perfection. And we will end with this. That's weiter in Perek Lamed, 3 psukim later. Ba'esahi, last pasuk in Perek Lamed in Yirmiyah, it says, Ba'esahi no Hashem eile lekim l'chol mishpachos Yisrael v'hemu yilulam. All the mishpachos in Perek Lamed Gimel pasuk Gedal, it talks about Hashem is going to bring back Beis Yisrael and Beis Yehuda. So the point is like this: there's a dichotomy between Yisrael and Yehuda, and the day will come where Hashem is the God for all mishpachos Yisrael. Why? Because Yosef is going to fix out his problems, and Yehuda is going to work out his problems. Both of them, the Navi used the same expression, but me, who could do it, Hashem could do it, and both of them uses the point of the storm. Okay, that's a man most good. I just bring out this thing that the word of Hashem is like a storm, meaning storms and the wildness of storms tells us that there's something dangerous and scary about when the word of Hashem comes. And the same way you can't stand in front of a storm, don't think you can stand in front of Hashem. Rather, you should be like the sheep, Yirei of. Don't be the person who's not Yirei Hashem and relies on Shekei Ish, because ultimately that doesn't work. And if you're that type of person, then you have Magid Rav Yaakov. Then you're the one who's able to be the Navi. Hashinkin Yosef was doing the mitzvah way, which is relying on the Gvus Hasus and not breaking in front of Hashem. And all that it has to do with the weather and with the sheep, who themselves are dependent on Hashem. Very good. Done? Good? Now I have these two videos. What's the eighth?